All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting in-depth review. Today, we are going to be looking at the new adventure book for the Power Rangers role-playing game called Adventures in Angel Grove. Now, quick reminder, if you do enjoy this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All those things are super important. Let's get going. So, my in-depth reviews are exactly that, in-depth. That means I talk about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things I think they did well, the things that I think they need to fix. And I do that chapter by chapter, sometimes subchapter by subchapter. It gets very, very in depth. However, a lot of people come to these just wanting to know, hey, should I buy this? So I always start off all these in-depth reviews with a section where I go, should I buy this? And I separate potential buyers into three separate categories. The first one is players. Players are people that are primarily going to be playing a single character when they sit down at a table. They're not going to be sitting back behind the Game Master screen or anything like that. The second group is Game Masters or Dungeon Masters if we're talking about D&D, but in this case it's Game Masters. They have a very different set of needs and wants from an item. And then the final group is what I call Lorehounds. Lorehounds may never actually sit down at a TTRPG table, but they really, really enjoy the world, the lore of the things. So they have very different needs compared to the other two groups. So, should you buy this? Well, let's start this off. The first group, should players buy this? So, Adventures in Angel Grove is exactly that. It's actually a series of interconnected adventures. There's actually 4 different parts, and each part is its own little adventure in itself. But this is more than... While theoretically, yes, you could probably run each one as maybe a one-shot, there's a little bit more here for each one of these adventures than I would say would really fit into a single one-shot. So I do kind of consider them like little kind of combinations of adventures, despite the fact that there are very, very clear stopping and starting points between each adventure. That being said, for players, that aspect is not going to be useful to them. To be perfectly honest, it's probably not a great idea for players to read those sections, because then when they're playing, well, they're going to know all the secrets and everything. And half of the fun of this particular Adventures series is there's a lot of unknown things that when the adventure first starts, there's just all this stuff that doesn't make sense. And in the adventure, it explains to the DM, by the way, this is why this is happening, this is why this is happening, in case the players decide to go off the beaten path and things need to make sense. But part of the fun of the adventure is really figuring out, okay, what in the world is actually happening? Why are these things going on? So in that particular instance, that's not a great thing for players. Obviously, this book is geared towards Game Masters. That being said, there are a couple things in here that I think, really one like really big thing in here that I think is really fun for players, and that is, I'm going to open it up. By the way, this is the first time I've actually had the physical product in addition to the digital product, because this came out like the day after we had to spend like $2,000 fixing some piping issues in the basement that I live in. So I didn't have the money to get this so I didn't pre-order it. I actually ordered it after it had launched, and that meant that I got this pretty damn fast. But this is something I wanted to mention. Anyone from Renegade, if you are watching this, this is something you may want to fix in future printings. Remember when I talked about the original Power Rangers RPG, and one thing that I was a little bit upset about is they didn't have a map. Well, boom, baby, we've got a map that large portions of it are cut off by the seam. This the map itself is really, really great. And to be perfectly honest, I think this map should have been in the core rulebook and not in Adventures in Angel Grove, despite the fact that it gets a ton of use in Adventures in Angel Grove. But for all the use that it gets in here, they have little small sections of the map that are zoomed in there. So that anytime you are doing something in a different part of Angel Grove, you have a little smaller map of it so that you as the GM know where the players are, and you can do make it easier. So I understand why it is in here. I think it was a bad idea. I think it fits significantly better in the core rulebook than it does in the adventure series, because again, I don't think everybody is going to pick this up, but I do think everybody should have a map. It's a really, really important part of playing a tabletop RPG, is just having a map of the world that you're in, because it makes it easier for you to feel connected to it when you can actually see, oh, look, there's where the juice bar is, and there's Fielding Canyon, and all those other things. I think that's really, really important. But the problem with this is the... and I will mention this again when I do the actual in-depth part, is the seam cuts off a decent, probably about, half an inch on each side of this seam, which wouldn't be that big a deal if it wasn't for the fact that, at least on the first page, most of the landmarks are about an inch to half an inch away from the seam. So you start losing things like Train Canyon you can't really see in the book, whereas the digital version, you can see everything perfectly. So yeah, if you include 2-page maps in future books, perhaps don't put them, especially right in the front of the book where the seam is going to be very, very. It's very easy if you try to open it up fully so you can see it to rip out the front pages. I specifically did not do that because I don't want to damage the book. The closer to the center it is, the slightly easier it is to open the book fully, just due to how gravity works, and be able to see more of it. So yeah, that being said, so as far as should players buy this, for the most part, the only thing that players are going to get out of this is a really nice map. And the map is really great. I really like it. Again, for me, as not just as a game master, but as a very kind of story-focused role player, having a map and being able to go, oh, I have my summer job at the library, and I can see here that Angel Grove High is over here and the library is over here. And so I know that, every day after school, I have to go all the way from the high school all the way down to the library. And, you get this idea of just how it feels to exist in this world. Other than that, there's really just not a lot here for players. By design, to be perfectly honest. This is designed for game masters. So my recommendation for players, should players buy this? Probably not. Even the digital version, I just don't think the map is really nice, but I will almost guarantee there are other ways to get this map from Renegade. And if there isn't Renegade, that might be something you guys want to think about, is maybe just selling a PDF of the map on its own somehow, or maybe even going a little bit further, creating a poster version of the map that you guys can sell as well. Because I personally would purchase that. If you guys have never seen here, this thing right here, this is the map of Taldore from the new Taldore source book from Critical Role. I have it. I went out and I had my brother go out and buy me a frame because I can't leave. Agoraphobia is fun. but I have it hanging up on my wall because it's a really pretty map and it's really cool. I would totally buy a poster version of this map. I think it'd be really, really cool and interesting. And it totally goes with my vibe here. So yeah, for players, I'm gonna say no. Don't buy this. The next group. Should GMs buy this? So whoa, is there a lot to unpack with that? Like, sorry, I am currently, because I forgot to open up the windows before. I am currently very, very quickly going through to get the price points of the physical and the digital versions of this, just so I could remember. So, all right, I have everything I need. I should have done that before I started the review. So, there is a lot here for GMs. First things first. Again, the whole thing, this whole thing is an adventure series, and so for someone that wants to run a pre-written adventure, obviously, you're going to want to purchase this book because that's exactly what it's designed for. However, there's a lot more here than just an adventure. As I already mentioned, there's a really nice map. I think every GM that wants to play the Power Rangers role-playing game and wants to use the Angel Grove setting for it, you really need this map. Again, that's one of the reasons why I believe so strongly it should have been in the core book and not in this adventure book. Because if you are deciding to just run your own adventures, Power Rangers as a brand is so, especially the era of Power Rangers that the role-playing game right now chooses to emulate, is so intrinsically connected to the city of Angel Grove that even if you're running your own game and the things like that, it's nice to have Angel Grove to set it in because it just feels more Power Ranger-y. Easy for me to say. So yeah, the map itself is really nice, and I like the map. Is it the most amazing, gorgeous map that I have ever seen? No. But it's a great map. And it does exactly what it needs to do. One of the things that I think is kind of an interesting decision that they made is there are little districts. Which is true if anyone has ever lived in a decently sized city. There are districts. And that's just always how it's been. I lived in the city of Waukesha for a while, and you had the college district, which was basically Carroll College, which is now Carroll University. That whole area was considered, the college district. Then you had historic Old Town. And you just, everybody that walks around, you could just go, oh, it's in historic downtown. And people would know exactly where that was. They have the same thing here. You have Angel Heights, you have Kotaro Hills, Middleton Heights, Civil District North, Civic District South, Civic District, Angel Grove Downtown, Angel Gates, University District, Industrial Bay. These are all things that just make the world feel more like a real place. Something I thought was kind of interesting, they color code each one of these places, and I thought that was a little bit weird. And it makes sense, but it also means that if you're looking for roads and streets and things like that, it is significantly harder to read this map because there's not only are they color coded, but they have different things, like some of them have cross hatching and other ones have little dots or little lines and things like that. So anyway, so the map is really good. The adventure, I will go through the adventure part by part and talk about all the cool stuff about it. But overall, the adventure itself feels very Power Rangers-esque. Each part feels like a decently long, probably like a 2-part episode of Power Rangers. They do get a little bit formulaic whereas I think almost all of them have a first part where the Rangers have to go out and find something or go on some sort of a scavenger hunt style thing, whether they're actually looking for specific things or they're looking for information or whatever. It shows up in every single one of them. The first part generally tends to be them just running around looking for stuff. And then the second part is much more combat oriented. Fun fact, this is an extremely common way to build adventures. The old D&D Encounters program from 4th edition, that's how every single encounter was built. You had role-playing first, combat second. And that's how it was designed to be played. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but something that's nice for GMs is, especially if you are a new GM, this is a really great thing if you can learn how to template. Templating, what I mean by learning how to template is basically being able to look at the adventure and take out all the specific stuff, like, you know, this time this happened and this, and just looking at the kind of format of how it's built and those kind of core building blocks without subjects and without specific monsters and stuff like that, and just kind of seeing how the adventure is built. This is a really, really great book if you do want to get a much better handle on how to build Power Rangers games, specifically using the Essence 20 system. So even if you are not going to run this adventure at all, which I think it's a cool adventure, but even if you're not going to run it at all, this is a really, really good example of how to build adventures in Essence 20. And something that I do think is really, really nice. Me reading over this book, I now have a much better idea of how Essence 20 is supposed to play. Again, there was an adventure in the core book. It was an okay adventure, but it was an introductory adventure, and I think it, as far as introductory adventures go, it was okay. But because it was designed to teach a new system, it does every single introductory adventure for every system that exists does the exact same thing. And if you just look at an intro adventure, you're not really going to get an understanding of how the system itself works. Good example, the D&D Adventures League, the first adventure in every single season, or at least all the seasons I was involved in, the first one was the intro adventure, and it was always built the same exact way. It was 5 mini adventures that were designed to take about an hour each, and it was designed to be played in 4 hours. So it was actually specifically designed to not be able to get through every single one of them. And at least for conventions where you had to stick to that 4-hour time slot, it was remarkably common. It was remarkably common to only get through 3 of the 5. But if you tried to figure out how to run D&D 5th edition off of those first introductory adventures, you would get everything wrong, because those introductory adventures were not meant to feel like full D&D. They were training courses. This series of adventures gives you a much, much better idea of how Essence 20, specifically the Power Rangers flavor of Essence 20, is designed to be run. And that's a really important thing to know. Even if you are going to bend and break the system completely to be able to tell your own stories, which I'm totally okay with that. I'm not the kind of person that goes, no, you have to follow all the rules all the time. And it's not my thing. So if you want to use the Power Rangers role-playing game as a stepping stone, this is still a really, really useful thing to have, especially since there's not a ton of people playing this system yet because it hasn't existed very long. For D&D 5th edition, there are literally tens of thousands of hours of games that you can watch from everyone from amateurs like me, well, I guess technically I'm professional because I got paid to do it once, but beginners, not like me, all the way up through industry experts like Chris Perkins and Matt Mercer. I would consider an industry expert. Matt Colville, all those people, like, they're running games constantly. So there's tons of places to figure out how to play the game that's not really described in any book. It's true of every RPG system. There's going to be little bits and pieces that are just, you have to play it to be able to figure out, oh, this is how it works. So going back to what I was saying about should GMs buy this, that's a really useful thing, is just, this is going to teach you effectively how the game is designed to be played. Doesn't mean this is how you have to play it, but understanding how it was meant to be played should be the first step before you start breaking it down and doing your own thing with it. Because if you don't understand how it was designed to be played, you're going to make changes that are going to cause more issues than they solve, because you don't realize that those issues are issues that you have created, that the system had already taken care of, and now you have to do all that extra work to fix these issues that you created instead of just using the solutions that already exist. The last part of this that is really, really nice for GMs, at the very end, there's a section called Non-Playable Characters and Threats. Anyone that watched my review of the Power Rangers RPG knows one of my biggest issues with the book was the threat section. First of all, they didn't explain what any of the stuff meant. They actually released a PDF for free on their website like a week or two after the book came out, that actually explained, okay, this is what threat level means, and this is how you build encounters and things like that. These are all extremely essential things for GMs to have. The other thing I was not thrilled about is there just wasn't a lot of monsters in there. I mentioned before, the first season of Power Rangers had something like 40 some odd monsters, because every episode you have a different monster of the week. The book itself did not have enough monsters to run a single quote-unquote season of Power Rangers. So it just wasn't really great on that front. This adds a bunch of new threats and things like that, and there are some good ones here. The nostalgia factor in this book is through the roof. There's so much here, like, I know that. There's even references to other Sentai related stuff, like there's some Metal Heroes references in here. There's for anyone, I'm going to say a phrase that I've not said in many, many years. There's some Big Bad Beetleborgs references in here that you will not understand unless, like, they don't like go like, oh, Big Bad Beetleborg, but you'll see some pictures and stuff like that, like, oh, I know that. And if you're familiar with the Metal Heroes series, which is what Big Bad Beetleborgs is actually used footage from the Metal Heroes series, which is basically a different kind of flavor of kind of Sentai similar stuff. Metal Heroes actually did a bunch of crossovers with Super Sentai. Super Sentai is what Power Rangers gets all of its suit footage and Zord footage from. So anyway, there's so much stuff in here. I'm going to real quick see if I can actually count how many are here. There's a lot. I'm not going to count them, but there's a lot more threats in here. So again, for GMs, even if you're not going to run anything in here, just the tons of new threats that are in here make your job a lot easier. And I mean, oh man, some of the stuff in here. They've got Goldar. They've got Goldar stats, both his small and large forms. So again, if you want to run that kind of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers feeling thing, Goldar is such a huge, huge part of Power Rangers. He was the one monster that could go toe-to-toe with all the Rangers and could defeat them pretty regularly. It wasn't until pretty far into the series that Goldar, at least season 1, that Goldar was no longer this villain that was going to cause them a huge amount of difficulty. So yeah, Goldar's in there, and then they have a bunch of like Grumblebee. I remember Grumblebee, and the cool thing about this is they have monsters going all the way from, there's some season 1 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers stuff, season 2, season 3, going all the way up to there's even some Zeo monsters in here. So Grumblebee, I think he was season 2 or 3. I can't 100% remember. Nasty Knight is one of my favorites from season 1. He shows up in here. They have Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane is a Zeo monster, and one of the reasons that I recognized him instantly was the fact that he is the monster that the Rangers are fighting when the Gold Ranger is introduced, and it is one of the coolest Sixth Ranger introductions ever. Right up there with the introduction of the Green Ranger in Green with Evil. In season 1, like the Gold Ranger, it's really, really cool. The Power Rangers are getting their butts kicked by Wolfbane, and they're all just kind of like falling there. And then you watch as Wolfbane is just sitting there, and you see this like gold and black blur go, and you see him go, rah, 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 and he falls out. And then the Rangers go, "Ooh, what's that?" And they look up. And then you hear the guitar thing. You hear Gold Ranger, go, and you see Gold Ranger in all his kind of glory. And he sits there, ching, 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 ching. It's so cool. So anyway, yeah. So there's tons and tons and tons of really, really great, threats in here that, again, even if you're not going to run these are tools that you can put in your toolbox that when your Rangers are playing, or when you're running your game, you go, okay, I need a monster that I can build, an episode around. Oh, I'm gonna take Silverhorns. I'm gonna take Silverhorns and have him come in and do really cool stuff, or So yeah, and they also have a bunch more kind of minion style creatures, like a bunch of different putties, some other stuff that's a little spoilery, so I won't talk about it. But yeah, so overall, should GMs buy this? I would say if you're interested in running the Power Rangers RPG, the Essence 20 Power Rangers RPG, this is a pretty essential buy. The physical version of it runs in at $45. The PDF is $31.50. Previously, you could buy, what I did, you could buy the book, the physical book, and you get the PDF for free. That sale is over, which is how it always works with this. I wish I could have gotten this review out when that deal was going on, but I just didn't have the money to get it until fairly recently. And then when I did get it near the tail end of that deal, mental health and things like that just prevented me from getting the review out. So very sorry about that. Do I think this is worth $45? I do. The one thing that turned me off to this a little bit, buying it directly through Renegade, was shipping for me was bad. I think it cost me an additional like $15 for shipping. So a $45 book turned into a $60 book. And $60 is pushing it for an adventure for me. Generally, I tend to like my adventures right in the kind of $40 range if all it's going to be in is an adventure. This is kind of an adventure with a little mini monster manual kind of tacked onto it. So being, $45.50, it's a little bit better for me. Going all the way up to $60 because of the because of tax, obviously, and shipping. For me, that kind of hurt the bank for me. So in that particular instance, effectively being able to get it half price as the PDF is really, really nice, especially if you do run, like me, run games mostly online. So having digital versions is beneficial for me. Significantly easier for me to run games through PDFs than it is for me to run them through physical books. But that being said, I still think even with shipping and handling, there's ways to get, like if you, I believe they've got free shipping on orders over a certain amount. I don't know what it is. Talk to someone at Renegade for that. But most companies do. But just buying the book on itself was not enough for me to get the free shipping. So there's ways to get around the shipping, but even with the shipping included, I think this is worth it for Game Masters. It's a great book. The adventure itself, like I said, very, 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 very nostalgia focused, which, let's be perfectly honest, that's what the Power Rangers RPG is. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's a lot of really cool callbacks that fans are going to really, really enjoy. And then people that are not fans, especially not fans of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers specifically, which is most of the callbacks are still going to be able to get a lot out of it. So yes, definitely recommend. The final group, this is going to be long, folks. The final group, should Lorehounds get this? One of the things I've really enjoyed about the Essence 20 system in general has been just how reader-friendly the books tend to be. And what I mean by that is most of the books, you can pick them up and you can read them like a book. Where you start at the beginning, you just kind of read through. I've talked about in the core books, the one problem I have is they need to take chapter 6 and turn it, put it in the beginning where they explain how the Essence system works. Other than that, it's actually pretty easy to just kind of read through it. And there's kind of a through narrative, which makes it pretty fun to read. This is also true of this book. It does have a through narrative. The one thing that kind of detracts from that is if you are reading it, a lot of the mysteries that the players have to discover are told to the GM right away so that they can run the game correctly. Which is how it should be. I'm not saying they should hide stuff from the GM or anything like that. But it does mean if you're reading it more kind of like a novelization than you are as a game book, you're going to have a couple spoilers right at the beginning. That being said, it's still really interesting. Like they give justifications for why the things happen that make sense in universe. The story itself is kind of interesting. There is a lot of lore that they put in here that's really interesting. I do have to say, and this is just the Power Rangers fan in me, I did put the book down. Thank you, phone. I did put the book down fairly regularly when I would see something like, oh my god, and then I would have to go to like the Ranger Wiki or something and look up stuff and go, oh, so that's how this was different. Because the version of Power Rangers they have here is their own version. And we'll talk about that during the review, that they make some kind of strange choices as far as some of the things that are canon in their version of Power Rangers compared to other ones, or compared to like the main Power Rangers continuity. But other than that, and again, that's just because I'm a mega fan, and so seeing stuff that I go, well, that doesn't make sense, I don't think that's how it works, and going look back, go, oh, that is a difference that they made, is just a thing that I would do. But overall, it's nice. It's decent. Every time they kind of describe a new creature or something, they do give a little bit of lore to it. One thing I would have liked to see a little bit more is just a little bit more lore of each of the monsters. Each one of the monsters has a stat block that generally tends to take up a page. And the first part of the stat block, they will have threat level, size, strength, smarts, all that stuff. And then they will have a little, paragraph or two describing the monster itself, which works perfectly fine. And again, for Lorehounds, these are going to be things that are really, really fun, because the last part of the book is just every single page is more lore for you, and some of the lore that they have is pretty interesting. But I would have liked to see a little bit more. And again, they do it in the core rulebook with some of the things. But I would like to see a little bit kind of closer to like the monster manual, where they have more than just maybe a paragraph for each monster, especially some of the more important monsters. Like Goldar or something. I'm going to see if I can find Goldar. Yeah, I mean, Goldar has 2 paragraphs, which is perfectly fine. That's about the same that anyone else has. But Goldar is such a big part of this era of Power Rangers, I would have liked to see maybe a page on Goldar and a little bit of his history and stuff like that. Maybe his relationship with Zed and Rita, or his relationship with Scorpina. Things like that are really, really intrinsic parts of his character that were fleshed out over years and years and years of Power Rangers. And have been fleshed out even more in the comics and things like that. So, yeah. Overall, do I recommend this to Lorehounds? Yes, with a little caveat. I think if you are a Lorehound, the PDF is, unless you do not have a convenient way to read PDFs, I think the PDF is going to be the way to go. Paying almost double once you factor in shipping to get the hardcover, I just don't think there is enough benefit in the hardcover for a Lorehound to really justify them spending, $60 effectively, or a little over 60 when you factor in tax and everything. Just to get a decent amount of lore, but most of the lore is going to be related to this particular story. And like I said, this particular story is only canon with their version of the Power Rangers. They make a lot of choices that contradict the kind of main continuity. So if you're trying to learn about Power Rangers as a whole, this is going to give you different information than information you can get anywhere else. Which again isn't a bad thing. That means people like me who are really, really well versed in Power Rangers lore are still going to get some cool stuff out of this, and it's something that they're allowed to do. This is their version of the Power Rangers. They're allowed to make different choices. I think that's a good thing. So yes, do I recommend it for Lorehounds? Yes, but mostly just the PDF. All right, so in summation, for players, there's not enough here to justify getting either of them, so you can pass on this. For GMs, yes, this is a really, really essential. I would almost call this a second core book, just because it really kind of gives you an idea of how to run and how to construct Power Rangers adventures, and it gives you a bunch more threats. And then for Lorehounds, yes, but I can only recommend the PDF of a version. The physical version is just a little too expensive for the benefit that you guys are going to be getting. So, those are my recommendations. For anyone that just came here to see that, thank you for showing up. The rest of this is going to be very kind of mind-numbingly specific and things like that. So, thank you for coming. Please remember, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit bell icon, turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments below, let me know what is your favorite Zordon era monster that the Power Rangers fought. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, it is time for us to get into the in-depth review. As a quick reminder, my in-depth reviews are exactly that. They are in-depth. I am going to go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page, talk about the things I think are done well, talk about the things that I think are not done well, talk about the things that I like, talk about the things that I don't like. Sorry, there's something going on with my nose and it's driving me nuts. Yes, this does get fairly in-depth. I do put chapters in so that you can kind of skip ahead and you can watch this in pieces into the things like that, which I realize from a YouTube perspective is shooting myself in the foot because it kills my watch time for these videos. But yeah, it works better for everyone if we do it that way. So that being said, let's jump in to the in-depth review. So, the first part. Welcome to Adventures in Angel Grove. Just before Welcome to Adventures in Angel Grove, I got to talk about the map again. Again, the map is really nice. The map, I'm going to say this over and over and over again because I believe very strongly, the map should have been in the core book. I think everyone should have access to the map. It makes the world feel that much more realistic, and most of the places that are described on this map are described in the core rulebook. They just didn't have the map. I don't know if it was a timing thing, or if it was intentional that they wanted the map to be in here because of just how much of this book is meant to be kind of jumping all over Angel Grove, and in one particular book, actually going through a large portion of Angel Grove, chasing a terrorizing massive creature. Yeah, I really, really wish that the map had been in the core book. The map itself, I think, is an essential part of any kind of campaign setting, is having a map for it. And even if you're not going to play in Angel Grove, being able to look at the map and go, okay, well, these are the different places I should make my own versions of those. You know, having the youth center and the juice bar and the surf spot, and which is really, really funny because in Power Rangers, the youth center and the juice bar are the same building. They're both run by Ernie. Whereas here they're two separate shops. And the surf shop, I want to say the surf shop maybe didn't even show up in Mighty Morphin Powers. I'm not 100% sure. And then they have other things like, you know, they have a state park and airport and all these other things. So, you know, being able to understand that these are the different places and being able to see how they can be used in an actual adventure, I understand it works well in this book to have it in here. It really should have been in the core book. Print it twice if it's such an essential part of this book that it needs to be in here as well. But it really, really needed to be in the core book. That being said, I'm going to bring this up again because this really, really bummed me out. This is the book, and as you can see, it cuts off parts of it. And again, yeah, it's an extreme thing because you can press it down and get most of the map without too much difficulty. But the map was not created with a seam in mind. And so, and again, because so much of the map is clustered, at least in the first page of it, is clustered right at that seam, it really doesn't do well. And you actually lose a lot of stuff that's actually important. Like the Angel Gate Bridge, you lose most of it to the seam. So, yeah. That being said, going to the actual Welcome to Adventures in Angel Grove section, this is your kind of standard, you know, overview of the adventure itself. And it's a pretty good one. It talks about the level ranges. It says that you can take a team from levels 1 to 5, which because Power Rangers only have, well, hold please. I think I'm 100% wrong about that. I don't want to see layers. I want to go to roles. I am wrong. It goes all the way up to level 20. I don't know why I thought it only went to level 10. I've been playing a bunch of games, and half of them go to level 10, the other half go to level 20. It's confusing. So anyway, so this literally is your tier 1 adventure. If we're going to relate this to D&D, this takes you through the entirety of tier 1. Now, the tier system is a uniquely D&D thing. I don't know if they really have a tier system in mind for Essence 20 in general, but the whole purpose of the tier system is kind of to give you an idea of what kind of threats and challenges your players should be facing in each one. In D&D, tier 1 is mostly local stuff. You find a small town like Greenest, which is a really poorly named town, but it was the kind of central point in the first official D&D 5th edition adventure, Horde of the Dragon Queen. Your tier 1 stuff is going to be mostly, you know, doing very local stuff. You're going to have a home city, and you're going to go on little adventures, and you're always going to come back to your home city. When you get to tier 2, you start dealing with things that affect more planes. Maybe you're starting to deal with like your entire city state. Maybe you're starting to deal with your entire country. But things are a lot bigger than just a small, farm or a small little village where most of the people there. You're going to be involved with a lot more people. When you get to tier 3, that's when you start dealing with kind of world threatening events. Things like the Chroma Conclave from season 1 or campaign 1 of Critical Role. Things where there are multiple places around the world that are all dealing with the same threat. And then when you go to tier 4, that's when you start dealing with reality ending or universe ending problems. Things that mere mortals can't really deal with, kind of stuff. So if we're looking at this, and they do pitch this really strongly as, for lack of a better term, this is baby's first Power Rangers. And what I mean by that is this entire adventure is meant to be the introduction where a Power Rangers team goes from, 5 dudes just hanging out with each other, or 5 people that are just kind of come together to form this team, and they start forming the bonds that turn them into an actual team. Something that didn't start happening until much, much later in the franchise compared to Super Sentai is each Power Rangers team has a name. The original Power Rangers were called the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but they were the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for 3 seasons. And then they got new powers and they turned into the Zeo Rangers. Then they turned to the Turbo Rangers, and the Space Rangers, the Lost Galaxy Rangers, the Time Force, Mystic Force, RPM. Each team has a different name. And one of the things they talk about in the last chapter, which we'll mention in here, is that the team that gets to take center stage in this adventure doesn't have an official name yet. They aren't the Power Rangers, to just pick a name out of a number. They aren't the, Power Rangers Save Force or something like that. Or, the Power Rangers Backups or something like that, which will be a plot point in here. They don't have a coherent group identity yet, and they will kind of form their group identity over this campaign, which I think is an important part of kind of early adventuring in RPGs in general. The idea of that as you your tier 1 or your level 1 to level 4 to 5 adventure should be the party kind of getting to know each other and starting to realize what they like and what they don't like, and when they get to choose their subclasses in D&D, which doesn't happen in here. But that kind of helps them start realizing what their role is in the party. So I like that. It does give you little explanations of each different part, which I really, really like. They have a section that talks about how do I put this adventure into my campaign, which talks about, okay, well, this is not a full campaign. Effectively, this is just a beginning part of a campaign, and it doesn't actually have to be played sequentially. Between each part, there is a time gap, and it's done intentionally so that when your Power Rangers are doing their adventures and stuff like that, you can put one of these adventures in, have them run through it, and then have them go off on more kind of Monsters of the Week things, and then go back and play the next adventure a little bit later. It was actually a pretty common thing in Power Rangers and just in television in general, is you would have some things that were, there would be some episodes that were more kind of serialized, where there was a through plot and everything, and there was... I'm not sure if I'm using that word correctly. There are some episodes that would kind of build onto the larger meta plot of something. Then there would be other episodes that were just kind of, the Rangers learning about themselves, but it didn't really push forward any sort of meta plot or anything. And so this can be used to do this. And the other thing that I kind of like about this is every part you end it on, well, they solved the tiny problem that they meant to solve in that part. However, there's a lot of other things going on that they just weren't able to deal with, and they deal with that in the next section. It happens every single time. When you get to the end of part 4, there are still questions that haven't been answered. And they actually have a section that says what comes next, where they talk about, this is where you might go next. This could turn into an inspiration for an entire meta plot of your entire campaign, or this could turn into just something cool that they did, and then you kind of tie it off and put them into a different overall plot or meta plot or anything like that. So yeah, and then they talk about what is an adventure series, which is basically just kind of explaining how their different adventures are going to work as they publish more of them, which I hope to see more. I would love to see what high level Power Ranger stuff looks like. Because again, this is just kind of giving you an idea of what tier 1 adventures look like. And anyone that's run high level RPGs in general, everything changes once you start getting to high levels. So yeah. So that is the Welcome to Adventures in Nature Grove section. Moving on. Drank a little bit early there. Part 1. Gridquake. I am going to preface the rest of this is there will be some minor spoilers in this. I will do my absolute best to not talk about anything major, or when I do talk about it, I will talk about it in generic enough terms so that if you are a player that is watching the actual in-depth review of this, that it's not going to spoil absolutely everything for you. But you have been warned, there will be some slight spoilers in this, so nobody in the comments get mad at me and going, oh man, I was going to play this, but now I know that putties can have weird hands, and how am I supposed to go for... We'll talk about that in a little bit. So that being said, Gridquake. Probably one of the most unique choices that they make in this is the fact that the Power Rangers team that is central to this adventure aren't the Power Rangers. And what I mean by that is the big inciting incident of this adventure is there is this huge wave that goes out through the morphing grid that causes all of these problems. My nose is itching like crazy, guys. Give me just 1 second here. Oh, man. I have no idea why it is doing this, but it is driving me absolutely nuts. I just took a shower, too, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so there's this huge kind of disturbance in the morphing grid that causes all these weird things to happen. A bunch of people lose time. Time starts working really, really well, are weird, and a bunch of people disappear. Specifically, the Power Rangers. So, this adventure is written with the idea that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers are the people that protect Angel Grove, and the players are not the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The players are effectively a backup team that Alpha and Zordon have made just in case the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers can't do their job. Which, from a lifelong Power Rangers fan, is a really weird thing to do. The reason being, the plot of every Power Rangers season ever is you get a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, but have kind of the potential to become heroes, that are brought together by some sort of mentor, whether that's Zordon or Dulcia or, whomever their particular mentor is, Mick in, which is hilarious. I think Mick is probably my favorite mentor from Ninja Steel and Super Ninja Steel. He was awesome. So anyway, and the kind of plot of all of these is they don't know what they're doing, and they don't really figure it out until the end of the season. And once they finally figure out what they're doing, it's effectively over. And depending on the series, sometimes they give up their powers. Sometimes they just decide to do anything, but they're done being Power Rangers by the time they finally figure out what they're doing. And so the idea that the mentor would choose to create a backup team just in case they couldn't do it is a really, really weird thing, because it brings up the idea that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers are very confident in their abilities, and they are the people that knows what they're doing, whereas these that they call the Rookie Rangers is what they refer to them in here, are just kind of the backup people. And it's weird, especially since they make a big deal in the book that you can't have multiple Rangers of the same color because of how the spectrum works. I'm going to make a video eventually, because I've never been super thrilled that the roles are tied to their Ranger color. I just don't think it's a great idea. And so I have some ideas about how, without having to change it in the mechanics, how you could just take the colors out of the roles and the system still works fine. But they do make an emphasis that you can't have multiple Rangers of the same color because it messes with the morphing grid. But now Zordon has intentionally created 2 pink Rangers and 2 blue Rangers because again, there's not that many Ranger colors to choose from in the core book. So you're going to have the same color as somebody in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So that decision in and of itself is weird. Now I know technically in the series, in the actual Power Ranger series, SPD, for those of you who don't know, SPD is one of the highest regarded Power Ranger series. It's a really, really great series. SPD stands for Space Patrol Delta, and the theme is they're basically kind of space cops. And they, their whole mechanic is, they go, SPD, emergency, and they have a little badge, and that's how they morph and all that stuff. Yes, I know how all the morphing calls work because I'm that big of a geek. But the interesting thing about SPD is the SPD Rangers are the B squad. The A squad goes missing, very similar to how this is described, and the B squad is called up. But the big difference there is SPD is a police force. It is a massive organization that is meant to police the galaxy. That is based on Earth, so it made sense for them to have extras. In this, it's not a large group or anything like that. It's just Zordon and Alpha. So that decision in and of itself felt weird. I kind of understand why they did, because there are, again, this is massive nostalgia bait, and so being able to interact with like Jason and Tommy, and this is another thing that I found really, really weird, is the choice of Rangers that they decided. Basically, you have, for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, for anyone who doesn't know, Season 1, the 5 Rangers were Kimberly, Trini, Zach, Billy, and Jason, and then they were eventually joined by Tommy. Season 2 came around, and there was some behind-the-scenes stuff that happened, and Jason, Zach, and Trini all not only left the series, they disappeared off the face of the planet. The final couple episodes that they were in, they weren't in. They actually used stunt doubles, and they used previously recorded dialogue. If you watch those episodes, it's really, really, really apparent that they didn't say any of the lines. They just took previous recordings and put them in. But they get replaced by Adam, Aisha, and Rocky. And then later on in season 3, Kimberly leaves and she's replaced by Catherine, or Cat. So the Ranger team that they have here is Jason is the Red Ranger, Zach is the Black Ranger, Aisha is the Yellow Ranger, which is weird because Aisha never interacted with either Zach or Jason. And then instead of Kimberly, they have Kat is the Pink Ranger. And then Billy's still the Blue Ranger, and then Tommy is the White Ranger in this. So they have this weird version of the Power Rangers where you have Tommy as the White Ranger, which is a season 2 and 3 thing. You have Jason and Zach from season 1, but then you have Aisha from season 2 and 3, and then you have Catherine from season 3. So technically, Rocky, Aisha, and Adam actually met Jason, Zach, and Trini because they transferred their power. So they actually interacted, but they were never Power Rangers at the same time. Kat never met Jason, Zach, or Trini until Zeo when Jason comes back to be the Gold Ranger. But that's the only time Kat ever met that. And then during Turbo, she meets... or Kim comes back, but she replaced Kim, so she only knew him. So yeah, Catherine in the TV show, Catherine never meets Zach or Trini. And so it felt really weird that they just took these random... It feels almost random, the version of the characters that they decided to choose. And it also makes it impossible to kind of figure out what part of the 3 seasons that they were the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers this could possibly have happened in, because the Ranger makeup that they have never existed in that way. And I don't know if, again, for those of you who don't know, Toi Trang was the actress that played Trini, and she unfortunately died in a car accident in the early 2000s. So I don't know if maybe they decided not to use Trini just because, out of, respect for the actress. But it doesn't really explain exactly why they chose to use Catherine instead of Kimberly. Not that Catherine isn't a great Ranger, but Kimberly, again, with the nostalgia bait and everything that this thing is, I really think Kim should have been in here because she's such a massive part of the origins of Power Rangers. So anyway, so getting to the actual adventure, all the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers disappear, along with a bunch of other things, and then a bunch of weird stuff starts happening. And this kind of introduces you to kind of the main mechanic of how these adventures work. The Rookie Rangers are called to the command center by Alpha. Alpha goes, hey, and Alpha and Zordon go, hey, weird stuff is going on. The Power Rangers aren't here. And that means Angel Grove is in danger because if Rita decides to attack during this period of time, there's nothing we can do. So you guys are being activated. Congratulations. You are no longer backups. You are the Power Rangers, which is a cool story to tell. Going from, hey, we're going to train you to do this. Hey, you are the understudies to, hey, guess what? You're opening the show tonight. I hope you have fun with that. It is a really cool thing. And then basically what happens is they are sent effectively on a scavenger hunt. They're given a bunch of different locations that they can go to try and figure out what's going on. And basically what they are called to do is they have to collect... what is it? I'm going to see if I can find what the actual... they have to use an energic analyzer to get enough readings of this energy to figure out what's going on. So basically, they have to go to each one of these places and pick up a piece of something. And this is kind of what happens in every adventure is the first part of the adventure is, okay, here's a bunch of different locations. Each one has its own little microcosm of something that's going on. So you get to deal with whatever's going on there. But in addition to that, you have to get something while you're there that will help you do what you need. And to be perfectly honest, the Energic Analyzer is a MacGuffin. And what I mean by that is the actual pieces of energy that you're getting don't really mean anything. You're just trying to get enough successes to get it up to 100%, and then you are told more information. Does that mean that I think it was bad or anything like that? No, I think it's an interesting way to run an adventure. And again, it really lets you lean heavily into the role-playing aspect. Like I said, each different area that they get to go to, like one area they go to is Jason's apartment. Another one is a gas station. Another one is the municipal gardens. And a lot of the locations, they actually have a map that, again, if you get the digital version, you can, just, select it, and then you can physically use the map in like a program like Roll20 so that they can use minis if they want. Or if not, you can just, show the map to the players or get a copy of the map in some way. Maybe probably the easiest way is if you have the digital version of it, you run it digitally, and then when the players need to see the map, you can go, oh, well, this is the map here, and you just cover up the parts of the book that you don't want them to see. Or again, if you have it digitally, you could be running from the book and then just zoom in on the map on like your iPad or whatever, so they can only see the map, and you can put that in front of them, and that works perfectly fine as well. So lots of different ways to do it, but each section, another thing that I really like in each one of these sections is after they describe basically all the different things that are going on and all the different things that could happen here, they have a section that says what really happened here. And again, the whole point of this part of the adventure is something weird is going on. Zordon doesn't know what it is. Alpha doesn't know what it is. In each one of these places that they send them to, there was a disturbance. However, they don't know what the disturbances were. None of that is told to the players. The GM, though, when you read the what really happened here, it explains this is why there is a thing here. This is why they need to come here, and this is the stuff. The players don't actually learn the what really happened here until much later in the adventure. Not even in this part. This is multiple parts later. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I think it's a good way to write something like this, is to go, okay, this is what's going on right now. However, this is why it's going on. I've mentioned before, I have these rules of training. One of my rules of training is the why is more important than the what. Explaining why something happens is significantly more important than explaining what it is that you need them to do. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't explain what you need them to do, but you need to put an emphasis on the why, and this is the why, and I think that's really, really good. While doing that, and there are some instances where you get some role playing, there's some stuff where they get a little bit of combat. Eventually, they get 100% of the data, and Alpha and Zordon are able to kind of get a theory as to what's going on. Then they get into more specific, like there's an incident with putties and stuff like that. And another thing that I find really, really interesting about this is every single combat encounter they have in here, they have a section that says defeat. What happens if the players lose? And that's another thing that I think a lot of GMs don't quite understand is losing, especially in a combat encounter. A lot of GMs think, well, if you lose in a combat encounter, well, that's a TPK. Congratulations, the campaign's over. No. Just because the bad guys won doesn't mean everybody is dead. And especially in something like D&D or any fantasy-based thing, when there's magic that can resurrect people, death is not the end. Death is a minor inconvenience, much like Marvel Comics. So having a defeat condition that kind of explains, okay, this is what happens if they lose and the story keeps continuing, I think is a really important point. I've mentioned before, from a training perspective, failure is the best teacher you will ever have. Success is a very, very bad teacher, because success generally doesn't tell you why you succeeded. It just, you succeeded. You got what you wanted. Failure generally will let you know exactly why you failed. And an important part of failure is learning to be able to see failure as, okay, why did I fail? What was it that caused me to fail? That's an essential part of learning and growing. So yeah, I like the fact that they put a defeat section. There's some more stuff you start dealing with Rita, and another thing happens that, again, I'm going to be very, very vague about. But you start getting the idea that maybe Rita doesn't know what's going on here either, which is another really kind of cool thing. Again, Power Rangers, especially Season 1, which is Season 1, Season 2, that's kind of, this first part is very much a throwback to Season 1. And so a lot of this here is always, well, Rita's the bad guy and the Power Rangers are the good guys. So anytime you see Rita, anything bad that happens, it's always Rita's fault. That's always how it is. And so the fact that Rita is confused about this, I think, is really interesting. And you start, and another reason why I think templating is such an essential thing for GMs to learn, is as you start looking at this, they start leaving really well-written clues that the players may or may not get, depending on how they play, to kind of show that, well, wait a minute, they're as confused as we are. If your players play a certain way, they may not figure that out at all through this entire part. And they may go through the entire part thinking that Rita has done something. And it is kind of written with that assumption for the players that this is something that Rita has done, because it's always Rita that's doing things. And so, depending on how they play, they may get to the end of this part thinking that Rita has done something and they're going to have to fight Rita. But if they play well, they're going to very, very quickly start realizing that Rita doesn't know what's going on either, and that, the plot thickens. Eventually, they get to deal with the fact that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Zords have started disappearing, except for one. And they get to deal with that, which is a really, really cool encounter, where they actually get to deal with a Zord without, because again, in the Power Rangers RPG, the Power Rangers don't get their Zords until level 3. So this is for level 1 or 2. They don't have Zords that they can call on yet. So they have to deal with another Ranger's Zord, and there's nothing they can do to kind of even the odds against this thing. They just have to deal with it, which I think is really, really interesting and fun. They do another thing where they kind of send you to a bunch of different places to find your MacGuffin, which again is not a horrible, horrible thing. It's just, it follows a pattern. And then, then the final thing is they do give some final little things that are kind of dealing with the aftermath of this thing where people just started disappearing, and they have to deal with like a power plant that things are going wrong with. There's a couple different monsters that they have to deal with. Grumblebee shows up here. So yeah, overall, part 1 I like. There's a nice kind of balance of combat for people that want. I mean, Power Rangers itself is a combat-oriented television show. So if you're going to be running Power Rangers, you need to have combat. That's how it goes, folks. but there's a nice balance of combat and then just being able to be, non-rangers doing their non-ranger stuff. And, being able to walk around in their civilian clothing without, being Power Rangers and stuff like that. And you get to deal with the idea that, okay, well, if you do the wrong thing, you morph in the wrong place, you might break one of the 3 laws of being a Power Ranger. So yeah, overall, it's a cool introductory adventure. Moving on. Part 2. Blasted from the past. If you didn't instantly know what was going to happen just from the fact that they entitled this chapter Blasted from the Past, the artwork for this chapter gets rid of any confusion whatsoever, because the artwork, and this is something I thought was really interesting, they have a representation of the Ranger team constantly throughout this book, the Rookie Rangers, but the way that they did it is effectively, they have the blue Mighty Morphin Power Ranger, the yellow Turbo Ranger, the red Mighty Morphin Power Ranger, the black Space Ranger, and the pink Zeo Ranger. Though they've basically chosen a Ranger from each of the first 5 seasons, effectively, with 2 Rangers being technically using the same suits, but whatever. But you see those 5 Rangers, and then you see a giant Allosaurus in front of them. So, obviously, this entire section is about time going crazy. And this one actually, I think is kind of interesting, with a couple things that I think are potentially problematic. And we'll talk about that in a second here. But basically, between the first part and the second part, the first part ends with a section that's called "This is Bigger Than Anyone Thought," where they talk about, okay, something weird is going on, but it kind of ends with, okay, well, we dealt with the major thing, which was kind of recovering from the fact that a bunch of people just disappeared in this whole thing. So we've put a Band-Aid on that. People are still missing, and there's still weird things going on, but none of that is dangerous at this point. So you can kind of button it up and go, okay, that's done. You guys can take a day off. We'll call you when we need you. Get to part 2, again, you have another inciting incident. And this is weird fluctuations start happening. And without getting too spoilerific here, effectively different periods of time just start showing up in random parts of Angel Grove. So, just like before, they give you a bunch of different areas, and you get to go to each one and kind of deal with whatever's happening right there. The interesting thing about this one is each different area, just like the previous one before where you had to kind of collect something, this one, instead of collecting data that doesn't really matter, again, it's just, if you make a success, you get extra data, but the data doesn't do anything. In this one, each one of these different areas, you get a friend. And this is where, and I thought it was really interesting because they have in the Welcome to Adventures in Angel Grove, they do have a small little section where they go, by the way, in part 4, there is, we do put a content warning, there is kind of depictions of slavery. Not the slavery that here in the U.S. we are all very familiar with, where everyone of a certain skin tone was kind of, used. No, this is aliens, doing that. But just the mention of slavery in general can become a big deal for some people. So they put a content warning going, by the way, this is a subject that is dealt with in part 4. So it should be something that you bring up to your players. They don't mention anything about each one of these little time displacement things brings a different era into Angel Grove, and with each one of those eras, they bring a famous person from history. And kind of the unique thing about it is it's not Angel Grove in the 1800s or the 1200s or something like that. No, the first group you deal with is from Mongolia. You know, the opposite side of the planet, seen as Angel Grove, has always been referred to basically as a stand-in for Los Angeles or San Francisco, to the point where they have the Angel Gate Bridge. Yeah, so this is California effectively, and somehow Mongolia has been put in here. And the character that they deal with is someone from ancient Mongolian, doesn't speak English, but eventually you get a name. I'm going to see if I can find the guy's name, because I didn't recognize the name until they explained exactly what. There we go. So the name of the character that you meet in this particular adventure is called, I may mispronounce this, forgive me. Temujin Strongsteel is the effectively Anglicanized English translation of their name. Those of you that don't know, that is, according to this, which I didn't do my own research, I can do it right now. I'm going to see if this is something that they made up or what. I don't know. Well, anyway, they claim that oh yeah, so it is his name. So Temujin Strongsteel, the name Temujin is actually the first name of Genghis Khan, who, if you are not familiar with world history, Genghis Khan was the ruler of the Mongolian Empire, one of the largest empires in history. The only empire that ever dwarfed it was the British Empire, because they had boats, and Genghis Khan did most of his empiring on the land. But he took over. He effectively ruled the known world. And he is not a great figure in history. Something they were really, they did a lot was going through a town, breaking things, and then sleeping with all the women there, to the point where most Europeans and Asians have Genghis Khan DNA. Like, he is a ancient relative of massive parts of Europe and Asia, because he went everywhere and left a bunch of kids in his wake and stuff like that. He was not a great guy. They brought him in here to be one of your allies, and depending on how things work, he can join your team. The next place you go to, you meet Benjamin Franklin. Okay. Benjamin Franklin, again from the 1700s, he's a founding father of the U.S., spent a lot of his time in New York and Philadelphia, but sure, the 13 colonies barely knew that California existed at this point, but sure, no, we brought Benjamin Franklin, who gets to join you guys, and there are benefits for having him join. The next group that comes out is, I am 100% going to ruin this. So again, forgive me for just having extremely bad pronunciation, because I'm not particularly good at Arabic names. Sayyida al-Hurra was a Moroccan privateer. And she is, according to Wikipedia, she's one of the She's considered to be one of the most important female figures of the Islamic West in the modern age. So now we have someone from Morocco and the Middle East that actually has box text where she makes reference to things like thank Allah and stuff like that. And then the final person that joins your group is Sacagawea. Sacagawea, again, another very important piece of American history, but it doesn't particularly paint the Americans in general in a really good light. So, yeah, like the people that they kind of pluck out of history, first of all, doesn't make any sense. Because these people are from all over around the world that somehow got sucked into Angel Grove for no reason other than we wanted to add historical figures. And compared to just the unbelievably large amount of historical figures that exist in all of history that they could have chosen from, they chose a few that have some negative connotations associated with him. Like I said, Genghis Khan, he was a brilliant tactician. And again, he ruled the world. He effectively conquered the known world. And the only reason that he stopped conquering, I believe, was he couldn't do it anymore. Again, it's been a long time since I've studied world history. But Genghis Khan is not generally considered a great guy, but he's one of your allies in this. Sacagawea, again, had some horrible stuff. She was sold to somebody, and she again, she's kind of revered in the U.S. specifically. But the version of Sacagawea that we were taught, I have no idea what's taught in schools anymore because they've changed everything. But the version of Sacagawea that we were taught in school is nothing like what she actually went through. Yes, she was an amazing tracker, and she helped Lewis and Clark find their way across the country, which is really, really interesting and fun. But they totally forget the fact that she was sold to, I believe, a Frenchman. Because France is who settled that part of the Americas at that point. She was sold into marriage with him, along with a couple other people, because you can't just have one native wife, of course. There's a lot of stuff that they don't talk about at all in here, which I think is to their benefit, but I don't know, like, after what happened with Tales from the Radiant Citadel, where they specifically mentioned, by the way, don't use accents because you might be stereotyping someone and only we're allowed to stereotype, not you. This goes like to the exact opposite direction, where it would be, because there's so little information given about these characters in here, and I think a lot of it is meant to be just so that the players are kind of shocked at the end when they go, oh, this is Sacagawea, oh, this is Genghis Khan, or things like that, just to kind of go, oh, that's kind of cool. And the Power Rangers have done things like that before, where they've done stuff that doesn't make any sense. But they put so little information in here that this almost begs to be stereotyped. And that is not, like, this whole part, I would have a hard time running myself. And again, I am not the kind of person that will scream cultural appropriation, all this. I think a lot of that is overblown, and I think a lot of that is just argument for argument's sake. But this really flirts with being, again, especially since, like, Saida Al-Hura, I know nothing about this person because I'm not a part of the Islamic faith. I haven't done a ton of study into Islamic history or anything like that. So I didn't know that this person existed, and I had to actually go out and do research on her to figure out who she was. They give very, very little description of who this character is, and the little description that they do give up until the end, where she makes references to Allah, doesn't really explain who she is or anything like that. So it'd be extremely easy to just purely accidentally use an extremely stereotyped trope version of these characters, because they're given such a little amount of background behind them, and because they are historical figures, it almost requires you to do a little bit of your own research to ensure that you're just not you're not insulting entire groups of people with this. So yeah, this, I would say this is probably the biggest misstep. But I understand, every additional page in a book like this costs money, costs a lot of money. Not just in the physical actual printing of the page, and color ink and stuff like that is monumentally expensive. Not just that. Every additional line of text requires proofreading. It's an additional thing that can go wrong. Like, there's so many different things that just adding more stuff to a book causes. So I completely understand that there is a limited amount of space available, and every time you add more, there is a chance that you are going to cause more problems than you're going to fix. However, I really don't think they did anywhere near enough to explain these characters. I would have liked somewhere, anywhere, for them to have like a page for each one of them going, by the way, this is this character and this is where they are in historical reference of. If you're going to do something like this, you really do need to take that extra step of, by the way, we are plucking these people out of history. This is what they were. These are the things. It's very possible that, especially if you are not American, you probably have very little knowledge of who Benjamin Franklin actually was. If you are American, depending on how old you are, you may have even less knowledge of who Benjamin Franklin actually was, beyond the idea of a dude that used to fly kites with keys attached to the string, which is a wives' tale, by the way. Anyways, so there's so little information for these actual real human beings that in any other instance, if they just inserted characters, NPCs that might join the party for a little bit, the GM can just make stuff up, and there's not really going to be an issue with it. But these are real people. Not only are these real people, these are real people that are from history, that are essential parts of the history that they are from. And they're from parts of history that, at least in the States, are not taught very well. Again, I learned very little about Genghis Khan and the Mongolian Empire when I was in school at all. Most of my knowledge came later on, just because I like learning things. And I thought it was interesting that, again, the British Empire is the largest empire there's ever existed. I'm like, well, how big are empires in general? And I started looking into it, and the Mongolian Empire was really, really impressive. But I still know very little about Genghis Khan in general. I know nothing about Sayyida al-Hurra. It's just not a part. And I've learned a little of Islamic history. Most of Islamic history that I'm familiar with deals with Muhammad. Doesn't mention her at all, at least in the history books that I read. So with the fact that these are real historical figures that are massive parts of real cultures now, and they had massive impacts on history, you can't just make stuff up. Because if you make up the wrong thing, you might be insulting an entire cultural history. And no matter where in the world that you're playing this, these bits of history are going to be influencing your players. Islam is what, the second or third largest religion in the world. And this is a major figure from their history. Again, Genghis Khan, largest empire of the time. He ruled the natural world, the known world at that point. And like I said, most of Europe and Asia have him somewhere in their family tree. He was a major, major part. Benjamin Franklin's a founding father of the U.S. We have almost deified them. Sacagawea, again, became a children's story that completely overlooked the fact that there were some just extremely bad things that were done to her. These are real people that impacted the world, and there's nothing about them in this book. Again, I like the fact that, because again, this is a very Power Rangers thing, that they'll just randomly, like they had an episode in like season 2 or season 3 where Tommy gets sent back to, or Kimberly gets sent back to the Wild West, and she basically finds the ancestors of all of the Rangers and gives them power coins, and they become the Western Rangers. And they're basically, they still have their Power Rangers costumes, but they all have little fringe on their gloves to make them look like Clint Eastwood from whatever. Anyway, it was a really weird episode, but that's kind of a Power Rangers thing, that they will do weird things. So this feels very Power Rangers-y, but it flirts so closely with stuff that we've kind of learned better about. If you're going to introduce this stuff, you need to do a little bit extra work than just, taking something from history and going, well, we're just going to put it in, and now you get to fight with, Genghis Khan on your side. Isn't that cool? No, it's not. Yeah. This entire part, come on. Sorry. This entire part has a couple different monsters that you did to deal with. Like I said, as much as, yes, this does kind of feel like a single kind of episode of Power Rangers, it bare minimum is a multi-part episode, and they deal with multiple monsters. They've got a worm thing, a weave worm. Nasty Knight shows up in this part. Again, I love Nasty Knight. I think he's super, super cool and fun. And this entire really, what in the world is going on? By the way, anyone at Renegade that actually watches this, your PDFs have very large issues loading. And again, most of my RPGs I own are all PDFs. Every PDF you guys put out has seriously hard times loading each one of the layers and stuff like that, and it takes forever to go between each page. And apparently that has to do with how the PDF itself is compiled or something like that. I don't know. I looked it up because I thought it was maybe my computer. It's not. It's however you guys created the PDFs. You're going to want to talk to someone about that because they're really, really rough. Even if I go with the lowest quality ones, it takes about a second per page for stuff to actually probably 2 or 3 seconds per page for stuff to actually show up. And if you scroll multiple pages, it stalls for like 10 or 20 seconds. So that being said, this entire section, stop it. See, now I'm like the page itself keeps going in and out of, like, objects on the page just flash in and out randomly. This entire part is effectively, there's these little temporal disturbances, and you guys have to deal with them. And it ends with, and it wasn't an Allosaurus, it was a Gigantosaurus. It ends with the players having to deal with a Gigantosaurus, which is really, really cool. It's a really cool kind of, the end kind of fight of this episode. They deal with this giant Gigantosaurus, is really cool. But the whole kind of plot of this section is weird things are happening and they have to figure out how to make them stop. At the very end, they send basically everybody back to their time period, and each one has their own little farewell little quote that you get to read to them. Again, kind of flirting along the line of being insensitive. You may want to watch out for that. And if you are running this particular adventure, I strongly, strongly recommend that you actually look up each one of these historical figures and get to know a little bit about them before you start portraying them in your game, because this very quickly could turn into something negative very quickly. But yeah, so I like the idea they were trying to pull off in this section. The execution, I think, was done poorly. And this is the one part of the adventure that I'm almost okay just cutting this part out and giving them some other way to get to the next level. Because after each one of these parts, effectively the rangers level up. Like the first part, you're supposed to be level 1 or 2. When you start this part 2, you should be level 3. When you start the next part, you should be level 4. So each one of these is effectively a level's worth of content. Another thing that's very useful if you're learning how to run the game is this is how much you should be doing, at least in the low levels. This is what third level content should feel like. But yeah, to me, this is so borderline and requires so much more work from a GM to really learn these characters and make sure that they're not caricatures. That this part of the adventure I'm actually okay just skipping out on and writing your own thing to deal with that level range and then coming back. Because not a whole lot of this is referenced. Like you don't reference Benjamin Franklin ever again in this adventure. It was just a weird Power Rangers kind of thing. So, yeah. Moving on. Part 3. Dirge of the Dragonzord. For anyone that does not know, my favorite Power Ranger is Tommy, the green Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. For a lot of reasons. Maybe one day I will talk about just the weird childhood that I had. But one of the aspects of it was, at least between me and my brother, we each had our own thing that we liked. Like we weren't allowed to like the same thing. It was weird. So for Power Rangers, my brother liked the Red Ranger, Jason specifically. I wasn't allowed to like the Red Ranger because that was his Ranger. And then Tommy showed up, and Tommy was just massively cool. So Green Mighty Morphin Power Ranger is my favorite Power Ranger. Green is my favorite color because of that. In most of the MMOs that I play, I try to create a Green Ranger glamour or transmog or whatever it is. I try to create a thing that makes me look like the Green Ranger because I'm that kind of a nerd. I have a Green Ranger transmog for my Paladin in Final Fantasy XIV, complete with the shield and everything. I'm very, very proud of it. So Dirge of the Dragonzord, this is my favorite chapter because it's just cool. Again, without getting too spoilerific, effectively, and as I mentioned before, the flavor of the Power Rangers, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers that exists here, Tommy is the White Ranger at this point. So the Green Ranger and the Dragonzord itself, and this is one of my favorite parts of Power Rangers lore, is compared to everything else, like the Dinozords don't exist anymore. Because what happened was they got destroyed when at the beginning of season 2, the Dinozords got destroyed by Lord Zed. He destroyed them all, and Alpha was able to get little bits and pieces of them, just enough of them to allow them to upgrade into the Thunderzords. But the actual, like the Tyrannosaurus Zord, doesn't exist anymore. It got destroyed. The Thunderzords, the same basic the thing happened at the beginning of season 3. Master Vile, I think, if I remember correctly, destroys the Thunderzords. And it means that they can't use them anymore, so they have to go to Ninjor and get brand new powers, and they get new Zords and things like that. as Power Rangers went on, they stopped kind of breaking the Megazords every time. But when we go back to the original, the only Mighty Morphin Zord that still exists is the Dragonzord. The Dragonzord was never destroyed. It was never gone away. And in general, the Dragonzord was always considered the most powerful Mighty Morphin Zord. It could take on the Megazord on its own. And did so on quite a few different occasions. So one of my favorite bits of Power Rangers lore is the Dragonzord. To this day, as far as Power Rangers lore is considered, the Dragonzord is still sitting in Angel Grove Bay. It's still there. It's underwater because that's always where it kind of slept, and it's hidden so that people can't go out and just find it. But the Dragonzord is still there, and if anyone was to get the Dragon Dagger, they could wake up the Dragonzord, and it could come back out and do whatever it was told to do. And the unique thing about the Dragonzord is you don't have to actually pilot it. The Dragonzord is autonomous. The Dragonzord has its own mind. However, it does whatever it is commanded to do by the person holding the Dragon Dagger. So I just think for a plot point, I think that is a really, really cool plot point that in the television show they've never revisited. I think they have revisited it a few times in a few of the comics. I think Soul of the Dragon might have dealt with it as well. I can't remember because it's been a long time since I read Soul of the Dragon. But it's a really, really cool plot point that they've just never picked up on again. Well, here they do. Again, without getting too spoilerific, a creature gets a hold of a Dragon Dagger and uses it to call up the Dragonzord, and the Dragonzord starts attacking Angel Grove. And so this part, really? Okay. This is getting really, really bad. Maybe it's just because I had two things open. So basically, what happens is, again, you start off by, here's a bunch of different places you can go find the MacGuffin so that we can get to the next, go find the MacGuffin so that we can get to the next part of the story. So again, you go out and you go to these different places and you make a bunch of checks and things like that, and you eventually find some stuff. But eventually you see Wolfbane, and he has this weird thing, that looks like a dagger, but it also has holes on it like a flute. Or actually, to be perfectly honest, the Dragon Dagger is significantly closer to a clarinet in visual appearance than it is ever to a flute. Even open hold flutes do not look like that. The Dragon Dagger 100% looks like a clarinet. And I played clarinet for many years, so yeah, 100% it looks like a clarinet. So anyway, and effectively what ends up happening is I am just going to close this and reopen it because, dear Lord, has this gotten bad. Here we go. Let's see if I can get this so that it stops flashing me. So anyway, what ends up happening is wakes up the Dragonzord, and then because, again, the Rangers don't... this would be when they first would start getting access to their Zords, because they're now level 3 or 4. They haven't had their... they're level 4 at this point. They haven't had their Zords for very long. And to be perfectly honest, their new Zords are not going to be able to stand up to the Dragonzord. Again, the Dragonzord is one of the most powerful swords ever. So basically what they have to do is you have to go to different sections of the city and try and direct the Dragonzord to get it to the command center without destroying Angel Grove. And so it's this weird kind of chase / disaster movie style feel, and it's really, really cool. Like, everything about this is just fun. It definitely is going to be different. It's going to be a different feeling than most role-playing games that you deal with. Like in general, the way a role-playing game works is you are given maybe a dungeon or you're given an area, you get to explore it a little bit, you deal with some monsters, and that's really it. But you never really have to kind of run away from a massive, 50, 60 foot tall creature that is unstoppable as it destroys the city, and you have to do everything you can to lessen the damage it causes and keep as many people as safe as possible. It is just really, really a cool adventure. And they have a little section of the map that shows the exact path that it takes to kind of get to where the command center is, and like it's a really, really cool thing. And there's a bunch of different places where when the Dragonzord gets there, you have to deal with certain things, and each one has a different little adventure that you get to go through. And there's even some, like, one of my favorite things in this. So obviously, Giant Zord terrorizing the city. Power Rangers are nowhere to be seen. And these new Rangers, again, are not the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, not the Power Rangers people are familiar with. So effectively, most of the population is going to look at them and go, oh, look, cosplayers. And so what invariably ends up happening is the military tries to stop the Dragonzord, which they can't. And so there is a subsection. The section is called How to Herd a Dragon. But the subsection, and I think this is the greatest line written in this entire book, quit shooting the 5-story dragon robot, is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, basically you get to deal with the fact that you're trying to get it to a place where it'll get shut down. But then, the military shows up and is like, we could take care of this. No, you're just making it angry. Please stop. And I love situations like that where the good guys basically, you have to fight against the other good guys, and neither team is doing something, quote unquote, bad. It's just one team thinks that they can do something that they can't. You see this, over and over and over and over and over and over and over, again, like a really, really good example. If you've ever seen the movie The Fifth Element, they find the ultimate evil, and Cornelius comes into the president of the world, and he tells him, you cannot stop violence with violence. There's nothing that you guys can do. And so they have a phone call with this dude across the universe, who's on a big ship with big nukes. And he's like, don't worry, I'm going to take care of this. And they shoot the nukes at it, and they blow up, and nothing happens, and it just gets bigger. He goes, oh, never mind. Now I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to do it. And he just keeps trying and keeps failing because he thinks that he is the most powerful thing, and he's in this big ship that he can take care of anything. And he is so outclassed in that particular moment by something so much more powerful than him that he can't even fathom the amount of power that this thing has. And so because he doesn't have the full picture and he doesn't understand what he's going up against, he makes a stupid decision to attack something he has no ability to deal with. That's effectively what happens in this little scene. As you have the military going, don't worry, we can stop this. I don't know why the military is Australian, but that's just the voice that I came up with. And so it's a really, really cool scene. And so, yeah, effectively, just like every other part, you have these little kind of mini scenes that each one has its own thing that's going on, and you have to deal with it. And once you're done with that, the overall plot of the story keeps moving forward, but you have this little side, or not really side story, you have different things that you need to do. Like in this particular one, you have to try and convince the military to stop shooting it so it doesn't shoot them back. And in addition, you have to put out all the fires that it's made in this particular place. The next section is called Get Those People Out of the Way. And the entire purpose of that is to try and just protect as many people as physically possible. And so in order to do that, you try and get people out of the way. There's another section that's called This Way, Big Boy Chase Us, where you literally try and convince the Dragonzord to attack you instead of the other thing. the other people. So, I mean, it's a really, really inventive, interesting, fun thing. And again, even if you don't want to play the entire campaign, part 3, I think, is the best part of the adventure, because it's super well written. We'll try this again. It's super well written. It's interesting. It does things that you don't tend to see in RPGs in general. Like, a lot of RPGs are kind of power fantasies. And let's be perfectly honest, Power Rangers in and of itself is a bit of a power fantasy. But something that is ingrained into the idea of every single Power Rangers team is, yes, the Power Rangers are more powerful than the rest of the populace. However, their power is still dwarfed by what the bad guys have. And so they have to be smarter than their enemies, and they have to work together. And that's the whole point of Power Rangers. This idea they are constantly being put in situations where they're at a massive disadvantage, and they constantly have to figure out how to deal with that disadvantage in a way that is moral, for their particular morality. And sometimes they fail and sometimes they succeed, but that is kind of the core of Power Rangers. And this part is such a good example of kind of Power Rangers whittled down into a nutshell. Is you're going to be given situations that you can't deal with. You can't stop the Dragonzord. The only thing you can stop the Dragonzord is the Dragon Dagger, which in this particular thing is in the command center. So you have to get it to the command center. There's nothing you can do to stop it. However, there are things you can do. You can minimize the damage. You can save people. You can do this and this and this. So the Power Rangers focus on the things that they can control, and they don't try to do what they can't. And it's such a great thing to deal with in a tabletop RPG. And there's so much more that you can use. And this is another thing that's very Power Rangers-esque, is the idea that the people experiencing it, in Power Rangers' case, the people watching the show, or in this case, the players playing it, can learn more than just, how to play their characters really, really well from this. You can use this as a teaching moment to go, hey, listen, there are going to be situations in your life that you can't handle. For me personally, I have a litany of mental illnesses that make my life miserable on a daily basis. It's why it's taken so long for me to get this review out. Understanding that there are going to be Dragonzords in your life. There are going to be situations that there's nothing you can do about it. A bad thing is going to happen. You're going to watch it happening, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it, because it's so big and it's so far beyond your realm of influence that there's nothing you can do to stop the event from happening. But just because this big thing is coming at you doesn't mean that the rest of the world just ends. The rest of the world's going to keep going on. And while no, you can't stop this big thing, you can deal with the after effects of this big thing. So while no, you can't stop this, you can stop this, you can stop this. There are so many smaller things that you do have control over that you can deal with. So yeah, the Dragonzord, you just have to weather it. You have to live through it. Whatever you need to do to live through it, get through it. But part of getting through it is dealing with the small fires that show up because of the big thing that you can't stop. And you can deal with the fires. And you can deal with the people running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Those are things that you can do. So understand what you can and can't do, and focus on the things that you can. I really like this. So yeah. Moving on. Part 4. Prism Prison Problems. This one gets weird, to say the least. Especially since they have a different Ranger now. Because they had the Blue Ranger before, and now they have the Green Zeo Ranger in here. So I don't know where they're getting these Rangers from. But, in the art. So part 4 is where part 4 is really where things start making a little bit more sense. instead of, and they say this here, you know, the first section in part 4 is, this is not a test. Prism prison problems, that is a fun name for folks, especially if you have a stutter, is the first traditional outing for the fully functioning Power Rangers team. They've worked well enough together to earn their place as protectors of Greater Angel Grove, the current fractured state of time and space, and as defenders against monstrous threats. So parts 1 through 3 have effectively been the rookie Rangers being called up and going, hey, the real Rangers are gone, so you guys need to step up and do something. These are all effectively understudies that are just jumping into the role. Part 4, it's their part now. They're no longer understudies that are just stepping into the role. Now everyone is kind of expected, no, you guys are Rangers. You are the Power Rangers. You're not a Power Ranger. You are the Power Rangers. And so they actually get sent off to figure out, first of all, where the real Mighty Morphin Power Rangers went and everything else. Talking too much about this section, so much of it is kind of explaining exactly what happened, why all this stuff. Like, this is the big why section. You start figuring out exactly what was going on here, and the players finally start getting the why to the what. And eventually what it leads to is you need to go off planet to save the Rangers and everyone else that was taken with them. So again, without going too much into detail, again, mechanics wise, it happens the same way. Is they start off, they go, hey, this is what's going to happen, but you can't go yet. You have to go around and find your MacGuffins. So again, they give you a bunch of different places that you can go to, where you have to deal with getting bits and pieces bits and pieces of information to be able to figure out what you need to do. They also add in a new condition, which I thought was interesting, called the Dominated Condition. I'll let you guys figure out what you think that's about. It works very, very similar to how every other adventure is going. You go around, you do a bunch of skills checks and things like that. This one does have a little bit more combat in this section than some of the other ones, where you get to deal with a creature called Pumpkin Remix, who's a remix version of the Pumpkin Rapper, another fan favorite monster that I absolutely adore. So Pumpkin Rapper shows up, but a different version. And eventually you get enough information that you can figure out where it is you need to go. And again, this is going to get slightly spoilery, so spoiler alert right now. They figure out you need to go off planet, but it's so far away and so many things have gone wrong that Zordon can't send you there directly. The only way you can get there is by going to Rita's Moon Palace and using her magical telescope to transport you there. Now, they explain the quote-unquote science to make this work. Doesn't matter. You get to infiltrate the Moon Palace, or the Lunar Palace, and this is effectively kind of a stealth section, which again is another thing that can be a lot of fun in an RPG or can be a nightmare, but it is it is something that every RPG needs eventually. You have to have a stealth mission. In every campaign needs to have some sort of stealth mission eventually. It's a rite of passage. You need to do it. And as far as a kind of iconic way to bring a stealth mission is going through the Lunar Palace, it's just cool. Again, you can kind of fight your way through this. It's 100% not recommended because you will probably lose because it's massively stacked against you. But there's always that option. And then Yeah, you just get to go through. It's really cool. It really, really is. I like this section. Eventually, you get sent off planet if you succeed. Um, you get sent off planet. You eventually come to this effectively prison. This is where the whole slavery thing shows up. Um, this is another reference to Power Rangers as well. Like all this stuff here, all this stuff is directly from Power Rangers as well. None of this stuff is like the race that I explained is called the Harathi. Um, they show up, I think, in season 3 of Power Rangers, and it's a really it's a great episode. How it deals with it because Bulk gets to do some cool stuff. And Bulk and Skull really started kind of coming into their own with season 2, season 3 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They went from just being kind of the comic foils of the Power Rangers to being actual fully developed characters on their own, and they were really cool. So yeah, effectively, this is a combination Prison Break and stay alive long enough to wait till the timer counts down kind of encounter. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do to make things easier or harder on yourselves, depending on how the players decide to play. Like, overall, the whole thing is just really, really cool. And you actually get to meet Billy, Jason, Zach, Aisha, Catherine, and Tommy. And there's some cool things that happen depending on again, without getting too spoilery, there are some references technically to a Wild Force episode, but the Wild Force episode they reference is Forever Red, which was the 10-year anniversary episode where they brought back almost every Red Ranger from the series thus far. And it was really, really cool. And one of my favorite things about it is they deal with the Machine Empire. And they have these 4 generals from the Machine Empire. The suits that they used are all from the Metal Heroes series. And specifically, a lot of them were used in Big Bad Beetleborgs. And so if you look at these, you instantly go, oh my God, ha! I know that one. So like they have the green Beetleborg. They used his exact suit in, and the characters that they used to model these after, they're the actual characters from Forever Red. So again, this is another thing that for people that are not as familiar with Power Rangers, this is just going to be some interesting encounters that I think are really, really fun and interesting to deal with. However, for anyone that is a huge Power Rangers fan like I am, this is a reference to one of the most beloved episodes of the series. Forever Red is almost universally considered to be one of the high points of Power Rangers just in general. They have done kind of reunion style episodes since then. They did them before. They do team up episodes constantly, where you had the Space Rangers team up with the Lost Galaxy Rangers, or Time Force teams up with Lightspeed Rescue. Like this, it comes from Super Sentai, but specifically Forever Red was just everything about it was kind of a love letter to the fans, and it was really, really well done. And I don't think reunions in general have been done as well since. The Once a Ranger episode of Power Rangers Operation Overdrive was not really all that great, but they brought back old Rangers, and it was okay, but it wasn't really great. Megaforce and Super Megaforce were supposed to be kind of reunion legacy seasons. Like the entire series was supposed to be this huge homage to Power Rangers because Super Megaforce was based on Gokaiger, which was the anniversary. I think it was the 30th anniversary of Super Sentai. And so the entire plot of Gokaiger was this huge reference to every single or Super Sentai series since the beginning, where they got to basically transform into previous versions of the Power Rangers and use their powers constantly. It was a really, really well done series, and Super Megaforce butchered it completely. It is looked with such disdain, just because of how poorly it was done. And then Ninja Steel and I think Ninja Steel had an anniversary episode where they brought back Tommy and TJ and a bunch of old Rangers. Beast Morphers brought back Jason and the entire Mighty Morphin Power Rangers team, though Austin St. James was the only actor that actually returned for it. But yeah, so references to and again those anniversary episodes, I think probably the best one other than Forever Red was probably the Ninja Steel to the team up. But even that one was okay. It wasn't amazing. Forever Red is just really, really good. And so all the references to Forever Red in here are just so good. So you deal with all this stuff. You get a lot of cool callbacks. There's even a section where, again, without getting too spoilerific, Goldar shows up, and depending on what actions the players take, he may not be an enemy in this particular instance. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, it's kind of cool. They even have a section specifically said, ever want to be Goldar, where certain things happen, you might let the players control Goldar. So yeah, I mean, it's a cool section. And so yeah, that is, and eventually, you know, everything goes well. Everybody gets to go back home. So that's the end of part 4. Moving on. What comes next? Again, this is basically just a single page where they go, by the way, while for the most part, most of the mysteries of this adventure are fixed. However, the initial inciting incident of everything still hasn't been dealt with. Yes, we have an explanation as to why everything happened and who is behind it. There is a kind of mastermind behind all of this. I'm not going to reveal who it is, but we know that. However, just because we know who did this particular thing, this was bigger than just their plot. There are more things going on, and that's what the what comes next section is basically, hey, this is where it might go previous. Technically, what comes next comes at the end of part 4, but whatever. Moving on. Non-playable characters and threats. This is your monster manual section. I really, really like this. There's a bunch of just NPCs that get their stat blocks here, which is fine. But I am much, much more interested in things like Dark Warrior, or they have a stat block for the Dragonzord that you deal with here. They have a stat block for Bulk, which I was super thrilled with. And then, you know, they have Grumblebee and Nasty Knights and some of the other really cool ones in here. The pumpkin, polluted pumpkin wrapper. They have Scorpina shows up in here. Silverhorns is another one I think was from season 2 or season 3. The 4 generals from from Forever Red all show up in here. Weaveworm, Wolfbane, and then some Z Putty Patrollers. So I mean, just overall, everything, like there are so many really, really cool, fun monsters in here. And again, even if you're not going to run this, these are really, really useful. I cannot tell you how nice it is to be able to run pre-written monsters, especially when you don't know the system very well. And because, again, Essence 20 has not existed for that long yet. So nobody, even if you are running games regularly using Essence 20, you still don't know it that well. It just hasn't existed long enough to have kind of a meta for it yet. So having monsters that are pre-designed by the people that made this are really essential to being able to figure out exactly how the game is designed to work and to be able to make your own stuff. So yeah, and again, so many of the monsters in here are really, really iconic. Stuff that I was surprised didn't show up in the core rulebook. Like I said, Nasty Knight, one of my favorite characters. I think Bonehead is the only one that I haven't seen that I've been surprised it wasn't there. They might have been in the core rulebook, and I just don't remember it. But Bonehead was another one that was really, really good. But anyway, so yeah. So, final thoughts. Overall, like I said, I think this is a really, really good adventure series. I think it does a lot of things super, super well. It does kind of prep your players to get into kind of a system of the beginning of any storyline will start off with us going to look for a MacGuffin for a little bit, which may or may not involve some minor fights. Eventually, we will get to a point where there's something bigger and we get our monster of the week or a few monsters of the week. And a storyline will always end with a big fight. That's how Power Rangers works. That's how this works. And I don't think that is a bad idea for running RPGs in general. You know, ending them on a big climactic battle or ending storylines on a big climactic battle, I don't think is a bad thing. That being said, like I said, part 2 has issues. I think if you want to run it as written, you really need to research every single historical figure they bring in, or you need to throw out the historical figures and replace them with people that don't actually exist. Especially since so little of what happens requires these characters to be those characters. The way that Benjamin Franklin interacts with everyone else, it could easily have been Thomas Edison or anyone from just that kind of period of history, despite the fact that I don't believe Thomas Edison and Benjamin Franklin lived at the same time. I actually don't remember when Thomas Edison lived and died. But just kind of that area of time, you literally could just have anyone that was relatively well knowledgeable. You know, they're going to be your knowledge type person. Having just pirates from the Middle East works just as well as having one of the let's see, I'm gonna quote it again. One of the most important female figures of the Islamic West in the modern age. You probably don't need that. You could just have someone from there. And even if you do just get rid of the real historical figures to put just generic people in there, you still need to do the research about that time period to ensure that you're not making caricatures. So yeah, part 2, I think it was a swing and a miss. I understand what they were going for. I don't think it was pulled off particularly well. Part 3 is amazing and I love it, and then part 4 kind of wraps everything up really, really nicely. So overall, like I said, the book itself is solid. The book itself is gorgeous. Like again, if you look at the actual hardcover, now that I've finally done my review of it, I can put it on my bookshelf back there and display it. But it's a really, really well done book. It looks really professional. I haven't really seen any typos that jumped out to me. Like it's a great book. And overall, it really helps you to understand the Power Rangers RPG much better than the book. I've mentioned this in most of my Essence 20 reviews since Power Rangers. The original Power Rangers core book is not a great book. It does what it needs to do, but it doesn't explain things particularly well. I didn't understand the Power Rangers RPG until I read the G.I. Joe RPG because it was just better written as an introduction. And I really didn't understand the Essence 20 system until I actually ran a Transformers game. Despite the fact that it was a super short 1.5 to 2 hour game that really didn't get much done in it, it really gave me a good idea of how Essence 20 works. So this, in my opinion, really helps kind of solidify Power Rangers in and of itself. I think it just works a little bit better. It gives you a much better idea of how the system works. Yeah. I hope one day that Renegade has a chance to create an updated version of the core book and make some changes in it so that it reads a little bit easier and it's a little bit easier to understand, like the G.I. Joe RPG book or like the Transformers core book. Both of those are significantly just better written. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the team making them understood the system better. You know, Power Rangers was the first version of this system. They were still ironing out some of the kinks. When G.I. Joe came out, they knew the system better, and they'd gotten feedback on what didn't work with Power Rangers. Again, failure is your best teacher. And so they implemented that when they released G.I. Joe. And then they got some feedback from G.I. Joe, which is a significantly stronger book, but still had some problems, and they put it into Transformers. Every single time they learned, which is a really important thing to see in a company, is when they make mistakes, there's a bunch of different ways you can deal with mistakes. And we're starting to see a lot of different companies having to deal with that right now in the world. And we're seeing every single version of how to deal with mistakes. Sometimes company just pretends the mistake didn't happen. Sometimes they double down on their mistake to say that, well, no, it wasn't our mistake, it was your fault, and we're going to keep doing things this way because we did it on purpose. Sometimes they go, we're sorry, we did something really bad, and we're never going to do it again, and then hope that, you know, this public flogging of themselves somehow erases the mistake that they made, which doesn't work, by the way. Or you can deal with it like this, which is, okay, we screwed up, let's make it better the next time. It's obvious to me that the people writing Essence 20, who are part of Renegade, are listening to feedback, first of all, which is incredibly important, and they are making changes every single time. And this book is a really good example of it. This is a really solid, except for part 2, this is a really solid adventure series. It feels better than any one of the introductory adventures in any of the core books. They know the system better. It flows better than any of the introductory adventures. This is a natural evolution of this series, and I think it works well. Like I said, the only real big issue I have with it is part 2 is a little bit tone deaf. But the rest of it works really well, and I don't regret getting it in any way, shape, or form. I would love to run this adventure, though. For me personally, I probably would make some, not just the part 2 stuff, I would make some changes lore-wise, just because, yeah, it's cool that you get the little, the references to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You actually get to meet Jason and Tommy and Billy and all that stuff. That's all cool and everything, but I think I would much rather have this adventure be for the main Power Rangers team and give someone else, just make it their parents, because that was a really common thing that would happen on Power Rangers all the time, is their parents would get that. Or maybe instead of the current Power Rangers team getting taken away, we could literally just say, well, this was a previous Power Rangers team. You could still use the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but you make them adults. And your team is the new Power Rangers that is brand spanking new, that just got together. But instead of basically taking over from the Power Rangers when they're in their prime and having to deal with the fact that, well, now there's 2 Power Rangers teams, I actually like this a little bit better, as the old Power Rangers get called back a little bit because of what happens here. And again, it requires a little bit of creative rewriting, but I think it's very possible and doable. So anyway, that's going to be all for me today. As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important in the comments down below. I'm going to just ask the same question. What is your favorite Power Rangers monster from any season? Doesn't have to be Morty. You know, if you made it to the end of this, you no longer have to choose a Zordon era monster. You can choose any monster from the entirety of Power Rangers. You're a really, really big fan of what's his name? I only know his character's name is Leanbow. Korag, there we go. You're a huge fan of Korag from Mystic Force? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, this is all for me today. And I'll see you guys in the next time, all right? Bye-bye.